Hi and welcome. I'm Susan Giannantonio, and I'm here today to take an old painting that I never really felt was resolved. I think I painted this painting as a demo in class years ago, and I stuck it away. It never really felt finished. And so those types of paintings I consider, I use the word dogs. Friends of mine and I consider our dogs the paintings that we've stuck away and really never brought to conclusion. So I'm challenging myself these days to pull some of these out and not worry about whether I finish them entirely so that they're a completed painting, but instead I've decided to get some of these things out and play with them and kind of push some boundaries and try some things and learn and grow and experiment. And if they end up being pushed beyond success, that's okay because I've learned something in the process. So what I'm doing right now is I think I've used a neutral tint or a Payne's gray to achieve some darks in this painting. And as I look back over it, that gray really does not do it for me. I would rather use maybe some blends, some colors that please me a little bit more than gray. I think I was going for values, and I think this painting was a timed painting because it's one of my favorite teaching devices. It's one of my favorite painting devices so that I achieve some quick marks and spontaneity so my paintings look fresh. I like to do that sometimes. Please forgive my puppy. She's downstairs and wanted out. So anyway, getting back to it, I'm lifting some of that value, the dark value, and I'm using a very soft watercolor brush. This is a student grade paper. I think it's 135-pound paper that I use a lot for teaching, and but it lifts nicely. It must have surface sizing on it. So I really didn't have to work very hard to remove the darks. Now this is where I started. I wanted to plug in this little picture of where we started, and as you can see, I've lifted off quite a bit. I really love darks. I love to go into a painting and use a lot of dark values, but the gray didn't do it for me. So what I think I decided to do here was to add some dark values using color instead of the gray, instead of the neutral. I pulled out some sap green dark, and I pulled out some green gold. Those are two favorite greens of mine, among a few others, but I really like those. So that's the light and the dark of it. And I'm just sort of playing and building. That's where I pulled out the dark green. I wanted that green hill back there to sort of travel back behind the tree and come out to the left of the tree, which sort of pops that tree forward a little bit, putting a little bit of dark shadow around the tree. I like to scrape out some shapes of grasses. I think I'm using my fingernails, scratching in some grass leaves, grassy marks. So I did like those darks in the background and the reflections into the lake. I liked the effect of them. So I'm going to rebuild those with these greens. It's fun to scrape paint with my palette knife. It's another way that I like to make marks. With watercolor, I'm working a little more slowly and deliberately than I did when I first started this painting some years ago. I can tell from looking at it, there were a lot of very fresh gestural marks made on this sheet of paper, and now I'm being a little bit more deliberate and making some slower decisions. So here I'm dropping some green gold into the darker green, the sap green dark. It's a Daniel Smith. These are both Daniel Smith colors. And I'm kind of hoping to be able to show you how that green pushes, the light green has enough yellow in it that it pushes the dark green around a little bit. And I love it when paints mingle on the page like that. This is just play. Again, I don't do these things. In fact, most of my paintings, I really don't paint thinking about what this product, what the accomplished painting is going to look like. I love to play, and if my playful attempts don't pan out as a finished painting, so what? I've learned something, and I can take that lesson to another painting. So here I've pulled out some opaque blues. I have a lavender blue that is a Holbein paint, and it is quite opaque. And I have pulled out a paint that I have fairly recently purchased. Let's see if I can find it. Ah, yes, here it is. Royal Blue. This is a Sennelier paint called Royal Blue. And my friend Jean-Francois Arnaud, who teaches watercolor, introduced me to this color, and it's just quite lovely. Sennelier is the only company that produces this royal blue, and it too has some opacity. I wanted to put some opaques down to get rid of some of that Payne's gray. You can see it in there a little bit, but which doesn't bother me. But I just wanted, this is a memory of Chautauqua Lake in Mayville, New York. My husband and I lived there in the summers for many years. And so, in fact, the original painting was painted right there in front of our lake house. I did a plein air painting one day in class. So here I'm popping in some phthalo blue on top of those opaque blues, just because so often the sky there was just such a bright blue, and I love color. I have a blue mixture going here. And I'm just playing. I wanted a really wet wash of the blues. And once I get my lake filled with blue, I have a plan. I'm playing with my palette knife here, as you can see. Just making some marks. Just experimenting. I love to experiment. There's some glare there, I apologize. Dropping in more color, letting the blues meld on the page. I think one of the reasons I wanted to hold on to this and give it another go is because I don't remember anymore what colors I used when I painted this tree, but I really liked the tree. So I did love those trees that were along the lake anyway, so it's a good memory. But I dropped in some green back there. I wanted the green background to kind of flow from one side of the tree to the next. You can't tell, but this is more of that sap green dark. Just popping it in there. Just for value. I remembered the values that the first painting had in gray. Didn't care for the gray, but I did like the darks. My plan is to leave a sunlit background, those far hills. I'm going to just let the sun shine on them and leave the lights back there. It's kind of an unorthodox way of doing a landscape, to leave the lights in the background. So that sap green dark is on the left, in particular left of my brush right now. It's kind of melding with the dark green, and to me that gives the look of evergreens when they meld together like that. Putting some green reflection in the lake. I really do like to play with the palette knife. It keeps me from being too tight. It makes interesting and surprising marks for watercolor. You can see this green floating up into the wet sky because it's got so much yellow in it. More blue. Nope, I mean green. You can tell that I'm painting on a slant. The water's running down the page. I like to use a horizontal stroke for my water. Ah, here comes the magic sauce. I'm using here Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, which is an opaque watercolor. I'm using a very wet mop brush so that the edges of this white that I'm introducing will blend into the edges of the blue that I've put down. So I danced blue, quite a lot around the lake there. And this is absolutely an experiment. I have no idea what the results are going to be, but it's really kind of fun to play with this bleed proof white, and it's giving me back some white. So I've got translucence, I've got opacity, I've got a little of everything. And this may not be the last layer. This is just another layer. It's so much fun putting this down. Probably overdoing it, but it's an experiment. And as you can see, I decided to come back in with some of my blue mixture. I've got all kinds of paint in there. I've got phthalo and lavender and that royal blue. When you look at the lake in person, in real life, there are so many colors there. And you can tell that I'm just playing. I'm having a good time. I don't even have a photo reference. I'm here to play. Popping in, I think, some phthalo. We have the glare going, but I'll move it in just a second. I'm controlling the angle right now so that it doesn't just fall down to the bottom. There we go. Okay, laying it flat here. Assessing what it needs. Might do a little something more. I like to think a little bit about the edges. Oh, that was an error. So I quick grabbed something. I thought I had green on that brush. Wasn't thinking actually. So lifting that out, going back in with some of that dark green. People are afraid of watercolor. They think that it's unforgiving. But I believe that if you play with it enough, that you learn the properties, you can do an awful lot with it. People are afraid of it, and there's no need to be. You just can't be in a hurry to learn it because there's lots to learn. I'm taking a minute, trying to decide, are we finished, are we not finished? There, I'm dropping a little more green gold into the dark green mix. And finally, I decided some suggestions of grass in the foreground might be nice. I'm using just a little brush, tiny little brush, a rigger, to just pop some suggestions of grasses in the foreground. Lead the eye around a little bit. Scratching in a little bit more with my palette knife. You know I love my palette knife. Some seed pods on my grasses, and there's the finished one. You know, I think it works better for me to have taken out the grays and put in the greens. And thank you for watching.